Oh, we're going, aren't we, Jordan? I can see it on the screen now. We're locked and loaded, aren't we? You can nod if you'd like, or hand signals. I got a hand signal for
Some
you
sort
if
of
you'd
answer.
like it. Oh man, this is going to be fun. NBA Strategy Show is here Monday, October 30th. I am Josh Engleman, but nobody really cares that I'm on this show today, which is weird. They normally care every single day, but today, the one day where it's a little bit different. Ship my money. Adam Scherer is back from maternity leave. Adam, good to see you. How was it being off for a couple days? And by a couple days, I mean a couple weeks.
Couple months. Yeah, it was great. Had a good time. It's nice to be back though. Need the routine. Need to stop just sitting around doing nothing. So good to be back. But yeah, it was fun. It was relaxing. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I bet. I wanted it too, honestly, at that time. Not that I couldn't have gotten it. I just wasn't in any
You
position to
wanted it
do
for
it, but
yourself, or you were glad that I left?
both. It was just absolutely both. Next year will be a me version of this one for sure. Uh, Anything interesting for you over the weekend? NBA, NFL? We didn't have any MMA.
No, lost at NFL, lost at NBA. Nothing really came close yesterday. Had some good like Sam Howell teams, but nothing exciting at all.
Must have been pretty exciting for Could Be Travis, though. Super chat is in. This is not the first super chat I've gotten from Travis today. Feeling generous after shipping the afternoon only slate with 3 bullets for 100K. Welcome back, Ship My Money. One of the best teachers and players in NBA DFS. Travis, congrats, man. I saw those tweets. We talked about it a little bit on the process earlier, but always nice to see someone ship 100K, especially on 3 bullets. That had to feel pretty good yesterday on the afternoon slate. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
kudos, man. Kudos. It's got to be, you got to be up. I mean, it's probably like past 24 hours for you. Well, not even less than 24 hours, but you know what I'm saying here. Past day has probably been pretty energetic from the moment that ended. So kudos, Travis. Kudos. Like to see it. Adam, are you ready to break down 11 basketball games?
Ready isn't the word that I would use.
No, that wasn't the word that I would have used either.
Yeah,
It's going to be a
apologies in
journey
advance
here.
for me stumbling through this show.
And the deeper dive, and tomorrow's strategy show, and
Yeah,
tomorrow's deeper
tune in
dive.
next Monday, and maybe I'll be back to normal.
Yeah, people don't really realize it's a rhythm thing. It's not so much, you just don't. This job is very easy when you're in the midst of it. You could do a December NBA show. I could probably do it without opening anything.
I mean, I've done it borderline blacked out before and been fine.
Well, you think you've been fine. That might not be the consensus opinion.
True.
But
No,
you made
it's
it
tough
to the
now.
end
Like
of the show.
I keep like looking around, like I don't even know where things are on my screen. I'm sure I have stuff that like isn't even pulled up that I need, and then it's like doubly because it's the start of the new season, which is always tough anyway. And then I haven't done this in 3 months.
Well, time to see how you feel, because we're diving in. The first game we talk about and the first team we talk about is the most important decision points on the slate at this point. It's the highest owned game and the highest owned team. Are you ready?
Yes, sort of.
228 viewers in here right now, 57 likes. Hit the like button now. Help us out now that Adam's back. The Brooklyn Nets are 1.5-point favorites in Charlotte, 228 total. The Nets are without Nick Claxton today. They are also without Cam Johnson. They are not without ownership, however. 38% coming into Ben Simmons, 26% to Dorian Finney-Smith, 31 to Royce O'Neal, 36 to Spencer Dinwiddie. Even Cam Thomas and Mikal Bridges are in the teens. It's basically the same story on the FanDuel side. As best I can tell, we are going to be getting to a lot of Brooklyn, at least right now. News will open up more value throughout the day. You can see these guys change a little bit, but they were all over my contenders videos this morning, and they are all over our projected ownership. I don't even know how to throw this to you right now for context. Who's your favorite net as you look at it?
Right now, probably Dinwiddie, which kind of sucks to say, but only 6,100 on DraftKings, point guard, shooting guard eligible. We have him with a almost 36% boom percentage, 24% chance of being optimal is the highest on Brooklyn. So, I mean, we have him going a little bit over owned at nearly 40%, but it's one player. It's, NBA, obviously things are a little bit more projectable than other sports. So he looks really good. O'Neal, probably really useful as a value play, small forward, 4,300, second highest optimal percentage on Brooklyn. Clearly not an exciting fantasy option, typically around like 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute for him, but good position, good price tag. Just, hope he runs into some stats.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just they're freeing up 60 minutes. They're 25% of their normal minutes aren't available for today. So you're going to see Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith. Their minutes are so much more sturdy. Any chance that it's a Day'Ron Sharpe day at 4,500, or do you assume he's just going to play 3 minutes?
Yeah, I assume. I mean, I ended up with a ton of him the other day, so I assume he bounces back and has a massive game. But no, I mean, it's obviously a risky play. Came off the bench, like you said, only played 3 minutes, didn't play it all in the second half. Pretty tough to even find a way to, roll the dice on him. The price tag came up to 4,500 on DraftKings too, so really, really tough to want to get there.
Chat's talking up a lot about Cam Thomas. I don't have too much interest in it. I think he's fine at 6K, but I don't see like any major appeal.
Yeah, I think he's fine. It is a little surprising to me, I guess, that he's getting like half the ownership of Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie, I think, is the preferred option. You're getting more in the way of peripherals and all of that. But we know Cam Thomas can light it up. The minutes are there. Price tag is about the same as Dinwiddie. So, the gap between Dinwiddie and Thomas in terms of optimal percentage, 23.5% to 18%, is nowhere as wide as the 40 to 20 ownership gap. So I think looking at it from that angle makes him kind of interesting in tournaments. The ceiling is there. But I think it's also pretty much it's not a egregiously low price tag or anything.
No, there's not a lot of value to squeeze out there. And he's 7,800 on FanDuel. I can't even imagine rostering him at that number.
Yeah, highest usage rate on the team last game, 27.5%. We know that the scoring will or should be there.
Yeah, I'm worried about his floor. Not like I care what his floor is, but I think he's also very capable of not getting the minutes if it's like a bad Cam Thomas day. They don't ever seem to really like care about him. So
yeah, I mean, where do the minutes go though? If it's not Cam, like, is that just more Lonnie Walker?
Probably
Smith Jr.
Yeah. Like Dinwiddie, I don't think there's any scenario where Dinwiddie's leaving the floor like that. Right. Whereas Cam Thomas can, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Anything else we should be touching on for Brooklyn right now? I think this is just going to be a place where we're going to have a lot of exposure either way.
Ben Simmons also, I think, sort of interesting with point guard, small forward eligibility. Always fun, the first week of the season when you can pretend Ben Simmons is going to be good. But $6,400 price tag, point guard, small forward is nice. Only getting around 10% ownership, so a quarter of Dinwiddie's ownership at more or less the same salary. Basically, half is likely to be optimal. So another spot where I think Dinwiddie's going to be the one that shows up in lineups first. O'Neal, from a small forward standpoint, will be showing up more than Simmons because of his salary, but getting 3.5 times the ownership, less than half or less than 2 times is likely to be optimal. Simmons seems like he is a pretty decent piece as well.
Put me in the game, Coach Chris, saying that Cam Thomas is the only guy that can create his own shot on the Nets. That's a take.
Yeah.
Pretty sure Bridges is going to do it. You got to be creating your own shot a little bit when you're going to have a usage rate like him. And I'm not saying Dinwiddie creates great shots for himself, but he would definitely be on that list.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we saw what Bridges did once he came to the Nets last year.
Yeah. All right, let's hop over to the Charlotte side of this one. Only person getting any sort of love, unfortunately for me, is Mark Williams at 6,100. I was just hoping no one would roster him, but he is 12% owned. Highest owned guy after that is 4% to LaMelo on DK. You're seeing a couple guys get like 5 to 10 on the FanDuel side. You haven't had what'd you say?
How much ownership did you say Williams was getting?
It was 12 when I grabbed it last.
We have it at 3.
Really? I wonder if it ran twice. Let me grab it quick.
At least in the boom bust tool.
Not a problem. I can make I got to make one change quickly. I did not read off our ownership for the first game. So now that I've made that change in my sheet, I will now be reading off the ownership. 3% to Mark Williams. It
took all of like 6 minutes in my first show back for me to have to carry this again.
Yep. Well, this one's not really on me, but that's neither here nor there. 10% ownership coming into Terry Rozier is the high mark for the Charlotte Hornets on the DK side. just circling back to Brooklyn, it's also big numbers going to all of those dudes that I did mention. None of that was all that different. But Mark Williams is 3% owned. I will like Mark Williams. I'm going to hit you with this one now because you haven't had the rhythm of going through each game. It's a lot like last year. Every team has a center in the 5K, 6K range that looks like they're a decent option. So be ready for that. In case you just recommend a bunch of centers for the first 6 games, they're going to just continue to happen over and over and over again.
Yeah, which is reflected, like in the case of Mark Williams, 5% chance of being optimal. Nothing really to do with Williams, just there's a million centers.
Absolutely. Do you like anything on the Charlotte side? Because we're getting a bunch of Brooklyn. What stands out from Charlotte? Because I think the answer is not all that much.
Yeah, not a lot. The lack of ownership stands out just from, looking at it. I think it's a spot where there's plenty of guys that if they end up being a contrarian piece in a tournament lineup are going to make sense. But, like you said, Rozier leading the way at 10% ownership. We actually have him going a little bit under owned, 15% chance of being optimal. But we've only talked about Brooklyn so far, and you can still see why it would be kind of difficult potentially to get to Rozier when, he's $1,100 more than Dinwiddie. He's $1,200 more than Thomas. He's more expensive than Ben Simmons. And then that you're going to get plenty of good guards from other teams that we haven't talked about yet. He's shooting guard only on DraftKings, which limits your flexibility a little bit. So, looks like he's going a little bit under owned, still probably difficult to prioritize. Obviously, you're happy anytime you get to LaMelo, but he's expensive, not getting any ownership. PJ Washington's correctly priced. Mark Williams pretty much correctly priced. I don't think there's much that really stands out.
No, we're on the same page there. I wanted a little bit more from Charlotte just because of how much it seems like I'm going to have Brooklyn.
Yeah, and I guess, worth mentioning just for anybody looking at the last game, Mark Williams only played about 21 minutes because he was in massive foul trouble, particularly in the second half. So don't look at that and say, oh, yeah, well, he's playing 20 minutes. Richard's playing 16. Thor's playing 24, whatever. Like Mark Williams' minutes should be there if he avoids fouls.
Anything else for the Hornets?
Nope.
The Chicago Bulls, 3.5 point dogs in Indiana, 226 total. This Bulls team, heavy exposure for me on Zach LaVine and some of these Bulls over the first 2 games. Didn't matter at all. Then LaVine goes out and drops the 50 burger in the day that I don't play. Obviously, wasn't ever going to happen any different. 29% ownership coming into Kobe White right now. Got 13 to DeRozan, 19 to Vooch, LaVine up to 7,600 now, shooting guard, small forward. How are you handling Kobe White? Because I know that you are not a huge fan of Kobe White when playing alongside of all of the other real people on the Bulls.
Yeah, generally don't really like him. I had a lot of him the other day, unfortunately. He had a 7% usage rate in 28 minutes, 3.5 DraftKings points. It's, we've talked about it in previous seasons. Like, he's capable of going out there and chucking up a bunch of shots when that's what the Bulls need. But when you have LaVine, you have Vooch, you have DeRozan, that's just not what they want from Kobe White. So it's kind of, it's a reasonable price tag at 5,100. I don't love the ownership at 29%, given that he's just not very likely to play a massive role offensively. So again, there is that price tag is what makes him interesting, but it's just not the same level of offensive performance from him whenever he's sharing the floor with those main guys.
It's 0.69 DK points per minute so far this season is bad. And I don't think that it's all that off of what you would expect, even if you think he was bad.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to get last season pulled up, but I don't have any of my stuff set right. So.
That's always fun. Vooch, 7,200. Like, I think, clearly looks good. 19% owned. Center is just really weird on DraftKings now because you're going to see these guys, like some guys are going to pull ownership and you are barring any like really weirdness for that team for that day, you're going to find a couple centers around that person that are not all that different. I think that's the most interesting piece of projecting out DK lineups now, what you do at center.
Yeah.
Like Vooch in 20% of lineups on an 11 game slate. Like that's kind of wild to me when you get done evaluating everything.
Yeah, it's a big number, but he's also only 7,200, which is such a crazy price tag for Vooch.
Yeah. It's the position, man. It's a weird thing. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Because
and again,
it now feels like a terrible, like it feels like something needs to be done to fix center.
Go the fantasy draft route and just give you like 4 center spots.
Yeah. Something like that.
But yeah, and again, it's, we talked about it with Mark Williams a minute ago. Vooch looks really good at this price tag. Still only about a 10% chance of being optimal because the opportunity cost is so high.
Yeah. Any interest in Levine?
Yeah, I mean, there's always interest in Levine just because he can score. Small forward eligibility is nice as well to go along with shooting guards. You can play him in a bunch of spots. 9% ownership, 9% chance of being optimal. No real strong takes there, just a relatively low owned, high upside play. I think the same can be said for DeRozan as well at the same price tag.
On the opposite side
And
here for the
sorry, I finally got numbers up. Since the start of last season with Levine and Vooch on the floor, Kobe White has a 15.5% usage rate.
What's the, do you have his fantasy points per minute? Dokey doke. Indiana.
It is.
Are you pulling it up?
Yeah, 0.75.
Yeah, not good. Not good. Pacers side of this one, they're at full strength. Weird rotations for them so far. I really thought Toppin was just going to get 30 plus every night out, and that has not happened yet, but it's early. Highest owned guy on the Pacers, 7% owned Bruce Brown. I think he looks pretty good for point guard, small forward, 5,300. No one has double digits on DK or on the FanDuel side. So what do you like from the Pacers, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that stands out. Like you said, Bruce Brown, 7% ownership. No issue with a $5,300 price tag, point guard, small forward. Getting 1/5 the ownership basically of Kobe White on the other side of this game at that price tag is kind of interesting. Miles Turner, we know, gives you a massive ceiling because of the block upside, but 6,700 at a really deep center position, not something you can truly prioritize. Halliburton, you're always happy to get to. 2% ownership, 8% chance of being optimal. You know that he's capable of giving you massive fantasy games, but 9,400 point guard only, another just deep position that has a lot of good mid-range plays, makes it really difficult for like anything to actually stand out from this Indiana team.
I don't see anything that I would want to go crazy for. You want to pivot Vooch to Turner? Like, I get it, but it's
a lot of guys where in an individual lineup, they could be a really good option. They can fit really well. You have 6 chalky guys. You throw in Halliburton, you throw in Turner, whatever it may be. That's a really good play. There's nothing, though, that looks, like somebody that you would expect to be getting in tons of lineups, overall.
Yeah. But be ready. We're going to talk about 9 more games after this. They all look like this.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult slate right now. We have a couple teams on back-to-back, so maybe we get some additional info. Some guys start sitting out, but right now it's a pretty bleak slate on paper. Let's talk.
I mean, Brown looks like the most interesting piece just because he has MPE. He's only 5,300. We have him going a bit under-owned right now as well. But obviously not a guy that you're going to feel great about getting to.
Yeah. And like, there's a lot of Bruce Brownie type 5K multiple position type dudes that are just out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so 59 minutes played now since joining Indiana, 15.5% usage rate, just not the most fantasy friendly guy, but he does do a lot of things well. He should, get his minutes and all of that.
Like Barry 650 in chat said, thoughts on Nesmith. Like, there's no way to even talk about him on a slate like this.
Yeah, I mean, 5K price tag, we haven't projected for like 19 DraftKings points.
There's 80 dudes that are like him today.
Or better.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you're not one of the 2 best dudes on a team today or have some sort of value pricing, we're probably not going to say your name. It's just how it works. Tip off, promo code. You don't see it on the screen, but you will, because Jordan Klein, producer extraordinaire, will get that up there in some way. You've got basically 1 day left. This is going to end tomorrow. But if you're looking to sign up at Stokastic, this is the way to do it. Click the link in the description. Sign up for any one of our NBA packages. You're going to get 20% off. You'll get projections, ownership, our boom bust tool. You're going to get our Sims tool, brand new product for the NBA season. Seems to be working pretty well considering nerd-ass Greg pulled in 100K on Saturday. Great start to the NBA season for the Stokastic folks. Simulate 5,000 lineups against each other. Get ROI data for players for the entire lineup itself. Late swap. This is essential in NBA. Very different. Well, I don't want to say different than every other sport, but more important than any other sport is the ability to late swap. We have the late swap tool built into the Sims. So if somebody gets ruled out after lock, you can quickly and easily get that dude out of your lineups and get back to the highest projected ROI lineups that you need. It is incredibly helpful. You also still get the lineup generator. If you're a 1, 2, 3 lineup type person and you don't really want to use the Sims, you can still use the lineup generator. We get rid of all the crappy lineups first for you. Then we treat it like Tinder. If you like it, click save. If not, click discard. Can export up to 20 via CSV. But this deal is going away in a day. If you haven't signed up yet, folks, do it right now. Promo code is TIPOFF.
I have a question, Neesmith related.
Yeah.
Him and Toppin split 48 minutes last game. So Toppin played 18, Neesmith played 30. Neesmith played really well. Do you have any interest in going to Toppin? You know, somebody who, and it's probably not the slate for it just because there are so many games, but we know he's a good fantasy producer. And what if he just gets 28 minutes here?
That's a great question. And that is what I was hoping that he was going to do out of the gate, including opening night. And he didn't, which was weird. Maybe that was just because they beat the shit out of your Washington Wizards.
Well,
but Toppin,
Neesmith was the leading scorer on the team in that game too. Like, that's just not going to happen that often.
No, I don't know what they're doing yet. Look, if you think that Obi Toppin can play 28 minutes, like, 4 7-minute rotations like a normal starter, he can really blow a $4,700 price tag out of the water as a value option for no ownership.
Right. Like, the reason it's interesting to me is if you look at, I mentioned that they didn't share the floor at all. So if Toppin came out, Neesmith came in, vice versa. Neesmith subs in the first quarter. Toppin plays like 5.5 minutes, goes to the bench. Neesmith comes in, scores 10 actual points by the end of the first quarter, 7 more points in the second quarter. So just, going nuts, not missing shots, stays on the floor. But like, it's interesting to me when you look at the second half, Neesmith subs in, plays 4 minutes and 40 seconds to finish the third, plays the first 4 minutes, 40 seconds of the fourth. He ends up closing the game over Toppin. But like, let's just say you get that 8-9 minute rotation from Neesmith. He plays like he normally does instead of really, really well. And Toppin just closes that game and, gets more minutes. I think it's just a situation where it's obviously really risky, but it shouldn't be surprising at all if like a month from now you look back and there's a lot more games where Toppin played upper 20s than 18.
Yeah. Like, if I'm choosing between the two, I'm never choosing Neesmith and I'm always choosing Toppin. If I got to get to one of those two dudes from the Pacers, it's Toppin for sure. Because I think there's actual upside in that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think mostly this whole conversation was a waste of time from a DFS standpoint.
Yes.
Being like utility tonight, but just an interesting spot. It's always interesting to me when you get two guys that just aren't sharing the floor. And one of them happened to have a really big game last night.
The Boston Celtics are 10-point favorites in Washington, 229 total. You're going to have a real blasty blast watching this team play for the next year. Oof. Highest owned guy for Boston, once again, Drew Holiday, 21% owned. He's 35% owned on FanDuel. We're getting 13% coming into Porzingis. I mean, Drew is still just a little bit underpriced, but there's so many mouths to feed that are actual star players for Boston. I have a very hard time ever singling one guy out. I do think Drew is the best thing you can get to from Boston, though.
Yeah, 21% ownership. It's interesting. We only have him with about a 9% chance of being optimal. So that's actually behind Porzingis, who's getting less ownership. But the $6,800 price tag is really nice. Obviously, he does a lot of things well, can accumulate fantasy points without being scoring dependent, which is nice when you're playing with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Got 37 minutes last game, so the minutes are already there. He certainly looks good. I am interested in Porzingis just because he is a very good fantasy producer when he's healthy and not in foul trouble, solid matchup and all of that. So he's interesting to me at a little bit less ownership than Holiday as well.
Yeah, like no problem with Porzingis, but 13% ownership seems about right. That's where this slate starts getting really crazy. The things you like are like, okay, that guy's like a 10%er.
Right. Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of, at least so far, like, oh yeah, this, we're playing 60% of this guy and feeling good about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that just look similar to each other.
Yep. Like for the pay up options today, it's really difficult to just like pick one out of that lineup that, right. When you start comparing them to each other, it becomes really problematic. But if there's ever going to be a blowout, it might be Boston here. It's going to be a long night for Jordan Poole.
Yeah.
free from anything. Your Wizards do have Kyle Kuzma projected for 11% ownership. That's the high mark. If Gafford can play today, he is questionable. Add him to the list of those 5K-ish centers that are interesting point per dollar plays. I don't know how you want the Wizards today.
No, I mean, brutal spot. There's going to be fantasy production over the course of the year just because they're such a bad team and scoring has to come from somewhere. But 7,400 for Kuzma because of his positional eligibility, getting around 10% ownership. No real problem with that, but it's still not a good matchup. It's not like it's a really cheap price tag or anything. Gafford's another center. So sure, if he's active at 5,100, mix him in a little bit, but sub 10% chance of being optimal. Tyus Jones price tag is pretty much correct. We know Jordan Poole's going to chuck, but he's already priced to do that. I thought there was a chance that for the first, couple of weeks of the season, you'd be getting an underpriced Jordan Poole just because of the gap between what Jordan Poole has always been and what he's going to be on this team. But, the price tag's already adjusted to 8,100. So not a lot that stands out there.
Jordan Poole, 7,300 on FanDuel, still only 4% owned, but that's a much more reasonable price than 8,100 for him. I don't know if you want that at all against Boston, but he's going to take a pick and roll and just never find a matchup he's looking for. It's just like, oh, I got Drew off of me. Oh, cool. It's Jaylen Brown. Oh, they switched again. It's Jason Tatum. Oh no, it's Derek White. It's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Step back.
Toss the ball to somebody else. Yeah. Oh, he's going to be throwing up a lot of 6 seconds left on the shot clock, 38 footers off of 1 foot type stuff. Going to be a tough one to watch. Not a priority. I have nothing else for Washington. I didn't have anything to begin with, I guess.
Nope.
The Minnesota Timberwolves are 1.5 point favorites in Atlanta, 234 total. Atlanta on the back-to-back, coming off of a 17-point dub against the Bucks last night. They had Lillard and Giannis. That's a tough loss there for Milwaukee. 21% ownership coming into Naz Reid right now at 5K. Let's talk that one through, I guess, to start.
Sorry, trying to find Minnesota. Okay.
By the way, Jaden McDaniels questionable for this one. Has not played yet.
Yeah. So Naz Reid 5K, 21% ownership. We have him with a 13% chance of being optimal. We know he's a very good point per minute guy. He's still cheap. The big thing I think is that he has power forward eligibility. So it's not like you have him competing with all of those other centers. 28.5 minutes off the bench last game. I don't think that is something that you can count on happening consistently, but he's also not really at a price tag where you necessarily need that many minutes. So I think the ownership's a little bit higher than it probably should be given the downside risk, but still a very reasonable play at 5K.
He's not going to see this ownership if Jaden McDaniels is in.
Yeah, I'll say that. So that was the interesting thing for me is we have McDaniels projected in, and we still have Reid looking that good.
Unless I'm reading this incorrectly, we also have Jaden McDaniels at no ownership. So I wonder if that's a situation where the industry is split.
Yeah. Because we have McDaniels projected for 19 DraftKings points, no ownership. We have Reid projected for 26 DraftKings points. Yeah.
I think Reid comes down if McDaniels is out, then there are going to be a lot of minutes at the backup 4, backup 5 that Naz Reid is going to soak up. Then those minutes can be there. But if McDaniels is back, he's just limited then at that point. I don't think that Reid is playing. The good thing for Reid is that if he can get onto the floor, no matter who's in foul trouble, obviously Gobert is the preference for foul trouble, but he's got 2 bites at the apple to grab a couple extra minutes if it's Towns or Gobert.
Yeah. And it's big too, that they're to your point, they're willing to play him alongside Gobert and they're willing to play him alongside Towns. So, it's not like you're in a situation where if Karl Anthony Towns plays 38 minutes, Naz Reid can't find minutes.
Right. Zola Baxter said Poole had good games against the Celtics in the playoffs. That might have had a little bit of something to do with being on the Warriors and not the Warriors G League team.
Yeah, a little bit easier for the Celtics to key in on Poole now.
Yeah, they might leave Jordan Poole alone a little bit when Steph Curry's running off a screen. Yeah. I don't think they're going to be as nervous when it's Tyus Jones and Corey Kispert. Not that I don't like Corey Kispert, but that's besides the point.
I don't like Corey.
Do you want to do anything else here with Minnesota? Assuming McDaniel's in or out. I don't necessarily have anybody that jumps out.
I don't think that it's just another team, I think, where there's plenty of fine options. Gobert at 7K, throw him in the mix with, like Miles Turner, for example, as a pivot away from a much more popular Vucevic. But, I think Vuce is like where you still get to first between the two of them. Probably shouldn't be 4 times as popular as Gobert. He's not going to succeed that often. If I remember right, we had about a 10% chance, 10% optimal chance for Vuce, 8% for Gobert. So, solid pivot, if you want to go there in some individual lineups. Edwards is another pay-up option, similar to some other guys we've talked about already, where you're always going to be happy to get to him. Shooting guard, small forward eligibility is really nice. There's a lot of ways you can get him into your lineup, but there's just a lot of other players in that range that look very similar. Same can be said for Towns as well, I think.
It's a wild slate. On the Hawks side, I do want to mention 234 total in this one. This is the game with the highest total on the slate. Very important.
Yeah, it strikes me as one of those games where there's not, at least from the Minnesota side we just talked about, there's not much that's really standing out. Reed right now, I guess, excluded, but it's pretty likely like one of these guys ends up having a really big game. It's just that the price tags from like a median standpoint don't stand out.
We got a lot of ownership coming in on the Atlanta side here. 34% to Jalen Johnson at 5K. He got the start. They dropped Sadiq Bey out of the starting lineup. 24% ownership coming into Onyeka Okongwu at 3,800. That's a talking point that we can have now. And then another 12% coming into Trae Young, which shouldn't be all that crazy. Let's start with Jalen Johnson. How do you feel about him at 5K? Newly minted starter.
Yeah, I think it's very similar in some ways to like Kobe White, where I think he's clearly a good value play. We haven't projected for 27 DraftKings points, 5K, power forward, it should be easy to get to him. But 34% ownership is a ton. So that's not to say Jalen Johnson's a bad play. You can't play Jalen Johnson. If Jalen Johnson does well, Fish got rewarded, any of that. It's just, if you're playing somebody like Jalen Johnson or somebody like Kobe White, you have to realize that the ownership is there mostly because of their median outcome being favorable relative to their salary, as opposed to their range of outcomes being drastically better than other guys around them. So that's why you see Johnson with a 34% ownership, only 16% chance of being optimal. 16% still relatively high in the context of the slate, but he's still just not going to be optimal that often. So it's a spot where if you happen to be getting away from him in a lot of lineups, I do think it's fine. You can justify that decision by just looking at the ownership versus his chances of success. Similarly, if you're just getting to a lot of him, you can also justify that decision by saying, well, he's still one of the best values on the slate. He still has a relatively high percent chance of being optimal, and it's very easy to find good low-owned plays elsewhere. So I don't think there's like a right or wrong way to approach him, but I do think it's very similar to like Kobe White, where, the offense isn't going to run through Jalen Johnson with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray out there. There's still a decent chance that you just get an underwhelming game.
What are we doing here with Onyeka Okongwu? Because that price is dumb.
Right. I hate, it's kind of fun sometimes, I guess, but like the backup center prices when they're this cheap, like, Okongwu is just playing the minutes that Clint Capella doesn't play, which is probably like 20 minutes or so, but obviously the upside for more if Capella gets in foul trouble. 24% ownership is really the problem for me. Because the opportunity cost is so high. There are so many good centers you can play that are reasonably priced. If you get, 18 minutes from Onyeka Okongwu, there's a very good chance he's a good point per dollar play, but there's also a very good chance that those lineups are just dead because you gave up a position for 20, 21 DraftKings points. So I'd be a lot more interested if he weren't getting that ownership, because then at least when you get the 26-minute Okongwu game, where Capella's in foul trouble, you're getting really rewarded. You're not competing with that many Okongwu lineups. If a quarter of the field is going to play the guy, it's like, okay, well, the best case scenario happened, then I'm still competing with a quarter of the field. And the most likely scenario is that he just gets like 20 DraftKings points.
Yep. Yeah, this is a tricky one, but the price tag is just so problematic that it really opens you into a weird scenario.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because, at least so far, talking through the slate, pricing's been fine, but it hasn't been like super sharp or anything. We haven't been looking at these teams. I don't know how you can pay that price for whoever. You've gotten relatively soft pricing. Even just talking about centers, Vooch 7,200, Gobert 7K, 6,700 for Turner, 5,100 for Gafford. Like, it's not. You look at all those guys, and it's just like, yeah, okay, that's a fair price tag, if not a little bit underpriced. So it makes me think that the Okongwu ownership is probably a little bit less warranted because it's not a slate where you're starving for value and trying to jam in these top end guys. You have plenty of good mid-range options.
Helms talking about Capella's low minutes last game. They were low because they blew him out and he didn't close. He was set to play his standard 28 minutes if they didn't close with four dudes I've never heard of and Bruno Fernando.
Yeah. And Stephen Lee said, is the opportunity cost mitigated by what it gets you somewhere else? It can be, but that's kind of what I was just getting to talking about the mid-range guys is I don't know that this is a slate where that's the case.
Yeah. And we're going to see a different slate by the time we get to the deeper dive. Like, we don't know the status of the Lakers right now. If LeBron James is sitting on a back-to-back, like someone like Rui Hachimura is going to become an incredible value instead of completely not playable like he is right now. So things will look different and value will open up. That's going to unlock the top end more than we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as the, Capella, and they played Capella and Okongwu next to each other last game. Is that real?
Sure did. I get that against the Bucks.
Yeah. That makes sense, I guess. But still,
it's not a lot. You're going to cross over a minute or two. I don't think. If you're going to do it, that's the team.
Yeah, it was 2 minutes and 21 seconds. I just thought I was looking at it wrong. But what I was going to say was that in that first half, Okongwu played about 10 minutes. Like, you're just going to get a lot of games where it's like a 28-20 split. You're going to get plenty of games where it's 26-28 in favor of Okongwu for one reason or another as well. But that kind of just goes back to the ownership to me. Like, I want to chase those games when he's not being rostered by a quarter of the field. Yeah,
we want the Andre Drummond version of this one, I'm sure we'll name another center that's in a comparable spot to Onyeka Okongwu that isn't getting that ownership today. Anything else for Atlanta?
So actually Capella's ownership is interesting to me. He's only 5,800, 6% owned, 8% chance of being optimal. That's a really cheap price tag for a guy that is, he's a good fantasy producer. If he gets 28, 30 minutes, he can certainly give you a big game. So, nothing that I would go crazy on because, again, there are just so many options at center. But it is really interesting to me that he's just getting ignored, and that's a pretty favorable price tag.
Yeah. Like, given that ownership, I would assume that this is just the perfect opportunity to have half of Okongwu and double Clint Capella, and you just, walk away from it.
Right.
It's just it just makes too much sense on paper. Ooh, another just truly terrible team, and somehow they got worse. The Portland Trailblazers are 7.5 point dogs in Toronto, 217 total. This is the low total of the day. Portland is obviously without Anthony Simons and will be for a while. They are on a back-to-back. They got the shit kicked out of them by the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm just going to throw this to you broadly for Portland. 10% ownership coming into Malcolm Brogdon, 8% coming into Shaedon Sharpe. Very little else out there. There's a lot of shots to go around. There's time to go around. Do the prices really matter? Jordan, go ahead and throw this to a single shot for Adam while I go ahead and shut my office door.
So it's, I think, an interesting team in that it's really difficult to pin down, this is the guy that you really want. But kind of like we had talked about with, I think it was Minnesota a minute ago, there's plenty of shots to go around. Like you said, there's plenty of minutes. So from a median projection standpoint, guys like Malcolm Brogdon, Shaedon Sharpe, they just look fine. And you're probably not going to be prioritizing them. But from a range of outcome standpoint, there's still a lot of volatility here where you're very likely from game to game to see different guys step up. But it's also obviously early in the season, so you don't really even have a good feel for exactly how the offense is going to run. In yesterday's game, 21.7% usage rate for Sharpe in nearly 36 minutes. Also lost playing time to a blowout at the end, so could have played even more. Brogdon, off the bench, played 26 minutes, 30.5% usage rate. Jeremy Grant had a 30% usage rate. Scoot Henderson was only at 17%. So I think there's just still a lot of volatility here, and a lot of, we're going to kind of, as the season goes along, you're going to see how things, work out, and we get a better feel for how it's going to go. But right now, it just creates an interesting situation in tournaments where I don't think you're relying heavily on a $6,300 Sharpe or $5,600 Brogdon. Like, you're probably going to Dinwiddie or Cam Thomas first if you're just, looking for the highest projected guys in that range. But the opportunities are there. Same can be said for $6,400 Grant, only getting 2% ownership, $6K Henderson getting no ownership. So I think it's an interesting team to kind of just pick a low-owned guy here and there in tournament lineups, but
Yeah.
there's not one guy that really stands out as any sort of a priority, I don't think.
Yeah, like Portland wins this game, what, like 35% of the time or something? And when they do, like, are you surprised that Jeremy Grant went for 45 fantasy points? No. Shaden Sharp's shots falling that particular day, he goes for 45 fantasy points. No. Ayton finds the, I was going to say fountain of youth, but he's still young, finds something, 6,600 unowned.
Like the way I kind of think about it, when you look at Brogdon, Grant, Ayton, Henderson, Sharp, in yesterday's game, they combined for a usage rate of like, I don't know, 110%, something like that.
Yeah.
I think that number is probably, like it comes, their combined usage rates come in around that number often. But I think you just see from game to game, a lot of differences where, one day, it's, yesterday, Grant and Brogdon were the ones at 30%. You're going to get some games where Sharp's at 30%. You're going to get some, 24% Ayton games. You're going to get some Scoot games at some point. So I think like that combined usage is just always going to be there, but you don't know which player it's going to be any given night. And from a tournament standpoint, that's kind of appealing. It also means pretty low floors and modest projections relative to salary.
Portland team is going to be tough to watch all year. It's a shame. I wanted to care.
They'll be kind of fun to watch at least.
They're going to be so sloppy. It's all about Scoot really organizing the. I mean, without Simons, it's a real problem because he's like an actually talented offensive player. Shaden Sharp is not ready for this yet.
Right.
That's where it starts to get a little gross.
Do you have any
that miscast Jeremy Grant. I wish I did. 5,200. There's just too many of him.
Yeah. 26 minutes last game.
Yeah. Ayton played well in like the grand scheme of things, I guess.
Yeah.
Plus 2.5 EPM, but only in 21 minutes.
Yeah. You got an extra 2.5 minutes in the first half because of fouls for Williams.
Yeah. Not much else to say on the Toronto side here. Highest owned guy, 8% to Scotty Barnes, point guard, small forward, 7,700. Jakob Poeltl, I think, is pretty interesting in this one. We do have one talking point for Toronto. Doubtful tag on Precious Achiuwa, which I think is massive for Jakob Poeltl. Q tag on OG Anunoby. So I think there could be something here for Toronto, but I have my eye on Jakob Poeltl now that Precious isn't there to be his backup.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because Achiuwa played he played every minute that Poeltl didn't play up until the fourth quarter. So you see that a lot and it can kind of go overlooked where, a backup being out doesn't get a lot of attention, but it certainly, can increase the minutes projection for somebody like Poeltl, who's only $5,600, only getting 7% ownership. He's a good point per minute guy. It doesn't mean he has to play a ton more minutes, but it certainly opens the door for those minutes to be there if Toronto wants to give them to him. And also, only played about 25 minutes last game. Abbreviated stint to open the game, only played 3 minutes and 51 seconds, picked up his second foul, went to the bench, and Achiuwa came in. So, I think that if you're just looking at his playing time last game, it can be pretty misleading. One, because he lost a few minutes to the fouls early, and then two, because of Achiuwa most likely being out.
I assume you have Popcorn Machine up.
Yeah.
Pull up the rotation for Toronto for game one.
I've had more thumbs up, but I assume that's what you meant.
Yeah, but I meant Popcorn Machine, but same principle. Looking at rotations, they closed with Achiuwa in the opener.
What was
while holding a lead? Blew my mind. They just alternated these dudes. Like Poeltl started the first, second, third, fourth. Achiuwa closed the first, second, third, fourth. That's where I think the interesting thing for Jakob Poeltl shows up.
Hang on,
they played against Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like Achiuwa's kind of found the minutes so far, one way or the other. He played 24 in that one. In the next one, he played 22 or something.
Yeah.
Against Chicago, he played 22. Poeltl played 18. Poeltl fouled out of that one, so again, misleading there. It is interesting to me last game that they closed small. Grady Dick was actually in the closing lineup, but and that's obviously something they can do is go Siakam at the 5. But yeah, I just think given the price tag and given the different ways Poeltl can get more minutes, he seems really interesting.
Agreed. I don't have anything else here. Something might open up if Anunoby, like Barnes is fine, but if Anunoby ends up out, that will help just sort of across the board. The Gary Trents, the Scotty Barnes, like everybody just gets a little bit more if Anunoby ends up out.
Yep.
I don't have anything else for Toronto. This is a really ugly game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Pirtle to me is probably the most interesting. The rest of Toronto is just more of the same where, yeah, Scotty Barnes looks fine. So do a bunch of other guys in that price range. Same goes for Anunoby if he's in. It's to me, Pirtle's the guy that really interests me. And again, that does still come with him being a center. And so you can only get so excited about it. But it's a pretty nice price tag. And I think maybe just going a little bit overlooked.
If you want to get excited for something, guys, that's going to be Bet365, sponsor of this show. I hope you guys are in one of the states I'm about to mention because the deal is fantastic. Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado. They are the states that are important to you for this discussion because there is money on the table for you guys. You do not want to miss this. Here is the deal. For everybody that isn't in Kentucky that I just listed, bet $5, get $150. If you live in Kentucky, Bet365 feels terrible for you. They are trying to make your life a little bit better. Bet $1, get $365. Incredible start for you. If you're looking to get into sports betting, this deal will help you build a bit of a bankroll. Our odds shopper tools will certainly help you find some more plays. Again, Kentucky, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Iowa, Colorado. If you're not in one of those states, unfortunately, I can't help you with this one. Got to be 21 or over. Unless you're in Kentucky, only 18. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Moving our way through this slate, the Dallas Mavericks, 2.5-point favorites in Memphis, 227 total. The highest owned guy on the Mavs right now is 3% owned Luka Doncic. Kyrie is 14% owned on FanDuel, where he's only 8,800. I do think that price tag looks really good. If I'm playing anybody for Dallas, it's Luka and maybe Kyrie, but I can't imagine it's actually Kyrie. Like Maxey looks good for 3,500, not really a priority. It's Luka or nothing, and I don't even know how good Luka looks.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at as well. I mean, 12K. It's not that you can't pay 12K for Luka, but it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where when you get this sort of soft mid-range pricing where there's a lot of guys that are just, $500, $600 less expensive than they probably should be, when then you get like a correct 12K price tag on Luka, it just makes it so difficult to get there. Like a big reason that stars and scrubs historically has been a very good strategy is that typically the pricing is tighter on the mid-range guys and it leaves more value on the top end guys. They just don't price them high enough. That's not exactly what you're seeing today when you have a 12K Luka compared to say a $7,200 Vooch or some of these other guys that we've talked about in the mid-range. So that's why the ownership's as low as it is. Only a 5% chance of being optimal. That's also influenced by the fact that right now we don't have a ton of great value. It's an 11-game NBA slate. There's a good chance that by the time we're doing the deeper dive, we do have that value. But right now it becomes really difficult to get to Luka. Happy if you do, but really tough to get there. Same can be said for Kyrie. The ceiling's nice, but there's just nothing really separating him from Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton, LaMelo, and they're all relatively difficult to get to.
Yeah, it's just tough. And obviously Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving have all of the usage for the Dallas Mavericks. Like there's not a lot of there's not a lot of food scraps left after those two get a hold of it for 70 whatever minutes. So
Derek Lively.
We'll look back later and Luka will look better, but it's not that kind of day.
Yeah.
Then we go to the Memphis Grizzlies. Grizzlies are still without Steven Adams, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard, and Ja Morant. Highest owned guy here for the Grizz, 10% owned Jaren Jackson. He's 8,200 power forward center eligible. Single digits to Smart, Zaire Williams. Derrick Rose is getting 8% ownership. I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. Bane at 8,600, only shooting guard eligibility, 7% owned. Probably a little bit of a couple guys here, but no individual guy you go crazy for.
Yeah, I think it's just likely that a lot of your lineups have like a guy from Memphis, but which one it is kind of just depends on the rest of your lineup. If you need a cheap forward, Zaire Williams is fine. We do have him projected actually to go a little bit under owned, 12% chance of being optimal, 7% ownership, but clearly not somebody you're getting really excited about.
No.
Jaren Jackson's price tag is about where it should be. Same goes for Bane at 8,600 without Morant. Derrick Rose, getting those minutes off the bench at 3,500 can obviously give you a good game. 25% usage rate in 18 and a half minutes last game, but it's tough to get too excited about probably getting 18 to 20 minutes from Derrick Rose. So yeah, I think it's a team that offers a lot in the way of they have a lot of viable options that are going to be 5 to 10% owned, but they don't have any one guy that stands out as a true priority.
No, we're on the same page there. Little bits of Bane, little bits of Jackson, Smart, Zaire Williams. That's about it for me. I want this team to be healthy. This is a lost year for Memphis. At first, I was just like, shit, they need to make a trade, try to bring in a center. I don't think it's worth it. I really don't. I think they just kind of consolidate, figure it all out, and then you're playing for next year.
Yeah, better draft pick.
Yeah.
How long is Ja out for?
25 games, 20 games, 25 games. So a while.
Yeah.
Not as long as Steven Adams and Brandon Clark, but, a while. Oh, man. Yeah, they signed Bismack Biyombo as if that matters. It doesn't. When I said I wanted them to get a center, I didn't mean to sign an unsigned Bismack Biyombo. That wasn't, I meant like to get a real player so they can. Well, my first thought was, you try to go probably one of those centers out of Portland if you want like a real dude. Go get Robert Williams, give up the picks. But I don't think they have any chance to get out of this, even if they did that anyway. So not going to be that year. The Miami Heat are 5-point dogs in Milwaukee, 223 total. Milwaukee on the back-to-back. We are bound to find out something is different here. Keep in mind, they also lost by 17 last night to the Atlanta Hawks. On the Miami end of this one, no Haywood Highsmith. No, probably not Caleb Martin or Josh Richardson. Both Martin and Richardson are doubtful. Love is probable. Duncan Robinson's available. Jaime Jaquez is available. The highest owned guy on the Miami Heat is 6% owned, $8,500 Jimmy Butler. There's really nothing going on the FanDuel side either. I don't normally like Miami. Maybe this looks a little bit better if like Giannis sits or Dame sits tonight. We don't know that status. Just a bunch of for Miami.
Yeah, pretty ugly spot for Miami. Hero at 7,400 in tournaments is interesting. Just, playing really big minutes. Obviously, he can light it up. But 7,400 is pretty much where it should be, if not a little bit overpriced. Same can be said for Bam. Always a good enough play, but it's really tough when you're paying more for him than for Vooch, Gobert, Turner. These guys that are just $1,000 less expensive, give or take. Butler, small forward, power forward, getting the most ownership at 6%. It's just another team where, there's a few guys at low ownership that are somewhat interesting contrarian plays, Butler and Hero in particular, but I don't think there's anything that really stands out or anything that I would be expecting to get, a lot of.
Same. I just don't see it. And then on the Milwaukee end, hard to talk about it right now. I assume we get something on this back-to-back. It's not a national TV game, so you have to start thinking about these guys sitting like for sure on back-to-backs because of the national TV rule now. I think you're just going to immediately see it. So whether we don't have Dame, don't have Giannis, somebody's probably going to sit for the Milwaukee Bucks tonight. 7% ownership coming into a 10K Dame, none coming into an 11K Giannis. I mean, if I'm going to anybody here, it's absolutely Giannis before I go to Dame, but I don't have a priority coming out of Milwaukee.
Yeah, like you said, more information by the deeper dive, hopefully. But if we assume everybody is in, then yeah, nothing's really going to stand out here. Bobby Portis getting a little bit of ownership, played 21 minutes yesterday. Giannis, clearly, if you can find the salary, he's great. Do we not have him in? I don't think we do. 10K for Dame, again, just kind of in that bucket with everybody else.
Just so hard to go to Dame at 10K if Giannis is 11K. Like, they are not separate. They are different than $1,000 to me.
Right.
Especially with Dame at just point guard and Giannis having power forward plus center. Like, sign me up for Giannis. But I don't really think that we should even bother talking about Milwaukee at this point since they're on the back-to-back.
Agreed.
So then we go to Golden State. The Warriors are 3.5-point dogs in New Orleans. That is a 232 total. For the Warriors, they are on a back-to-back. They beat Houston by 11 last night. You have to assume someone's sitting for Golden State tonight. Chris Paul makes a ton of sense to me. Clay makes some sense to me. Steph makes some sense. Somebody's going to sit for Golden State on a back-to-back. It's just going to happen. We know this. We also have no ownership coming in here. We might create a little bit of value, but if all of these guys are playing today, I can't imagine playing a Warrior.
Yeah, same page. Like the way things look right now with everybody projected in, 2% ownership coming into Steph, 2% chance of being optimal. Everybody else, less ownership than that and lower optimal percentage. So, sort of similar to Milwaukee, where there's a good chance that we're interested in something by the time lock rolls around. But right now, I have no idea what that will be.
Derek K, Giannis is not doubtful. That is not a thing that is true. So for anybody in chat that's going to read that message, that is not a real message. Do I think Giannis could sit tonight on a back-to-back? Absolutely. He does not have an injury designation on the injury report because they're on a back-to-back. Yeah. Bird Gang, Kerr has confirmed everybody's playing. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't trust a goddamn thing that Steve Kerr has said. Do not listen to anything like that until that shit is in an injury report. Coaches lie every day, over and over and over again.
Steve Kerr, in particular, lies religiously.
Yeah. Yeah. Until I see names in an injury report or no names listed in an injury report, that's the only way that I'm going to care. So let's get out of Golden State until we get that news. Deeper dive, we'll have all of this information. So make sure you're tuning in 4:45 tonight as we break it all down. On the Pelican side, 17% ownership coming into a $5,700 Joe Val. 17% ownership coming into an 8K Brandon Ingram, shooting guard, small forward. If I'm going anywhere for this Pelicans team, I think it's 8K Brandon Ingram. I think he looks like the clear best option from the Pels.
I think it's Ingram or Joe Val. I mean, $5,700 for Joe Val is a really, really nice price tag.
I just discount center by default.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that's the issue is, he is still a center. You're getting like 3 times the ownership of Jakob Poeltl, for example. So there are plenty of pivots. Clint Capella, same thing. There are plenty of pivots even in that price range. And it goes back to just how deep that position is. But Brandon Ingram, shooting guard, small forwards, you can play him at the maximum roster spots, in the maximum number of roster spots on DraftKings. Only 8K. Obviously took a huge step forward last year, 32.5% usage rate in their last game, played 32 minutes, lost a few minutes to garbage time. You're typically getting 35, 36 minutes from Ingram, and the offense should essentially run through him for the most part.
Yeah, it's going to look good. Tough to get to Zion at 8,900, but position's fine. Clearly a ceiling.
Herb Jones, kind of interesting, just from like a pivot standpoint. He's 5K, getting 8% ownership. You compare that to somebody like Jalen Johnson at 5K getting 34% ownership. Like I said, when we talked about Jalen Johnson, there's not a right or a wrong answer to how to approach it. But if you are taking the approach of let me find some other 5K guys that have a similar range of outcomes, even if their median's a little bit lower, Herb Jones obviously fits that.
I feel like we're really in a great spot to just go out there, build like the chalkiest lineup you can find. And then it's just so easy to hot swap 2 or 3 of those dudes to half his owned guys. And you have a pretty solid lineup easily.
Right. And it goes back to what we were saying. We're like looking at one player and their ownership individually is a mistake, but you can envision having, a lineup or a build where you just have a lot of the popular guys, like you were saying. And then instead of Jalen Johnson, you have Herbert Jones, and that works.
Yeah. You swap out Joe Val for Jakob Poeltl, and right away, like you've just made 2 different lineups, pivoted around 2 separate Pelicans in different ways. Like as weird as it sounds, I think it's really easy to build lineups tonight and like fun lineups that you like. It just so happens that the player pool of the swaps that you're making are terrifyingly deep.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get rid of this chalky guy. Oh, there's 15 other guys in salary tier and position that are relevant to slot into that spot. It's tough, man. It is tough. All right, final thing that I need to touch on before we finish off these final 3 games. Schedule for the rest of the day. This one is going to be NHL strategy show coming up at 3 p.m. We've got a big 9-game NHL slate. Adam and I will be back for the deeper dive at 4:45. You'll also get NBA Live before lock from 6 to 7. And because it's Monday Night Football Showdown, NFL Live before lock. You get Laffy and Neil breaking down tonight's Monday Night Football game. Lots of content coming up. My contenders videos are already out if you want to watch them. And there's plenty of other content on the YouTube channel that you will enjoy. Also, guys, if you want to get into the Stochastic Hall of Fame, you guys should understand how that works. Go to stochastic.com/avatar. If you are using our logo on DraftKings or FanDuel, whichever site you're playing, and you can place in the top 3 of a contest that has 5,000 or more entries, all you got to do is tweet that win to Stochastic HOF. You're going to get a free month of the Stochastic package of your choosing. Now, you can only get one per calendar year. You can't just dominate. Some people could be set up to just roll out a free month every month. So we have that limited to one a year, but why not? Why not? If you're using just a random picture, if it's just your dog, you're stopping yourself from having the opportunity to get a free month of our Stochastic Sims. Don't sleep on that, guys. This is the time to do it. You see it on the screen right now. Stochastic.com/avatar. Tweet the wins at Stochastic HOF. Get yourself a free month. Doesn't get any easier than that, guys. 3 games to go, Adam. The Detroit Pistons are 5.5-point dogs in OKC, 226 total. Oklahoma City on the back-to-back. They got bludgeoned by the Denver Nuggets last night, which is going to be a problem for basically everybody in the league this year. The Denver Nuggets are just really good. Pistons, though, 10% ownership coming into Alec Burks, 13% coming into Asar Thompson, 17% coming into my personal favorite play for the Pistons, Isaiah Stewart, power forward eligible, center eligible, 5,200. What else do you see here from the Pistons? Do you want to go to a $7,100 Jalen Duren after these massive rebounding days that he's had?
Yeah, the Duren price tag is really interesting just because it's a lot compared to what we're used to seeing for him. But 33 minutes last game, the playing time's there. The production has pretty much always been there for him. It's just been a matter of him being on the floor. So I think the price tag is warranted. Getting 4% ownership, probably a little bit lower than it should be. 7% chance of being optimal. Definitely another guy I think I would throw in there as far as going back to what we were just saying about building a chalky lineup and then just swapping off 1 or 2 guys. If you have that build with Vooch and you need a lower owned guy, Duren's certainly one of the players that you could swap to. Duren, Gobert, Turner, we already talked about. So I don't think that the price tag is too high. I think that it's more or less where it should be, which is why he's getting very little ownership. But from a tournament standpoint, still some interest there. I'm with you on Isaiah Stewart at 5,200. Power forward eligible is really nice. Playing time should be there as long as he avoids fouls. Not a bad point per minute guy. Thompson with small forward eligibility at 5,500, getting 12% ownership. No real problem there. Burks at only 4,500, shooting guard, small forward. So you can roster him in the maximum number of spots. 25 minutes off the bench last game. Don't feel great about him, but it's a reasonable price tag. So Stewart, probably my favorite guy here. Thompson looks fine. Burks looks fine. You're not going to be upset about going to like a low-owned Duren, but it's tough to prioritize.
Yeah, he's more appropriately priced now, but just first 3 games, 14 boards, 17 boards, 15 boards, dominating the glass. It's fun to see. On the OKC side, they are certainly live to sit some dudes on the back-to-back. We don't know the status here for OKC just yet because they played yesterday. 15% ownership coming into a $5,800 Jalen Williams. I really like Giddey for $7,100 at minimal ownership. I'll never have a problem going to SGA, but he's going to look like all the other 10K plus dudes that exist today. We'll need the news, but for now, it looks like Jalen Williams is the guy everybody's going to.
Yeah, power forward eligible, 5,800. Going a little bit over owned, but nothing too crazy. 16% ownership, 9% chance of being optimal. SGA, just another pay up guard that if you get there, great, but probably going to be pretty difficult, at least with the way things look right now. Giddey's kind of interesting to me at 7,100 just because the ceiling that he gives you. Obviously, he's not their primary scorer, but he can get it done. Obviously has triple-double upside. So kind of interested there at only 5% owned, but Jalen Williams looks like the guy that you should be getting to the most often.
Yeah. Hopefully he plays. I assume we don't see someone tonight from OKC. I just don't know who that's going to be. The rest stuff, I don't really care too much. Like we're gonna for these teams on a back-to-back, we got to remember they are not required to release their injury report until 1:30 if they're playing a 7 o'clock game. If it's a 10 o'clock game, that doesn't need to be out for a couple more hours then too. So we'll get this news later on today. They don't tip off till 8. We'll probably get the Oklahoma City injury report at 2:30.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a pretty good chance I think that they just play nobody played more than 28 minutes last night.
Yeah, I assume they're fine. Look, with the changes in rules, I think you just have to schedule it better now. It's right. Since you can't do national TV games and they've got all these like star player type things, I think you're just going to get it like basically built into the schedule a little bit more. So I don't know what they want to do with Chet. Do they want to play him on back-to-backs? I have no idea. Like, we're going to learn a lot for some of this. Mr. Shadow Dog said, I'm going to tell my boss I can't work a back-to-back tomorrow. Here's the difference between, and I'm not just singling out you. We get that a lot. I read that a lot from people. These guys are salaried employees and they provide value. At an hourly rate job, if you want to tell them you don't want to work, they're just going to find a new you pretty quickly. They can probably just walk outside and grab somebody off the street. That's what value is. When you have it, you get to do shit like other people don't. Like take a couple months off and go take a sabbatical.
Yeah, exactly.
If Adam was useless, he probably wouldn't have came back. Nobody would have gave a shit. We wouldn't have noticed that he was gone. Now, he is useless, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I'll say that the fact that I'm not considered useless really just speaks to how low the bar is set by my coworkers.
Oh, man. Utah Jazz, 8.5-point dogs against Denver, 230 total. Denver on the back-to-back. Look, I know Jokic doesn't really care, and he's not the type to be resting and stuff, but did play a long season, shortened postseason, maybe. I expect somebody to rest for Denver. Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray. I don't know, but we don't know yet. We'll see it a little bit later. On the Utah side, highest owned guy is Talen Horton-Tucker. Once again, 5K, just point guard eligible, though. Does not have the MPE any longer. Do you want to get to anything from Utah?
I don't think anything stands out as a priority. Horton-Tucker, 7.5% ownership at the top, 5% chance of being optimal, also the highest on Utah. So again, if you get to some Horton-Tucker as a contrarian play, fine. Very, I think, logical pivot away from, say, Kobe White, who's getting a lot more ownership in that price range. John Collins at 5,600, getting 1% ownership. Not thrilled to get to him, but probably shouldn't be getting 133rd the ownership of Jalen Johnson.
I hate this Utah team so much. I really do. Walker Kessler's been really bad so far, which is tough to see. It's not going to get much better if Jokic is out there because he's going to eat everybody. No one can stop this dude. I don't really want much of Utah. At least we're getting two teams that do play at elevation. We're going to need news on Denver. I think they're live to really open up a lot of value. If we just drop a Michael Porter Jr. today or a Jamal Murray, if Julian Strother's at the flat 3K shooting guard small forward, if you want to see Peyton Watson get more minutes at 3,500 a power forward, that is there. If Jamal Murray happens to sit, Reggie Jackson's 5K, but if he plays 30 minutes, that's going to be a really nice price tag for him. There's something here for Denver, probably. Maybe it's just you play Murray or Jokic or one of the starters and feel good. I have no problem going to Jokic, but 11-8, you're paying the whole way for it.
Yeah, and it comes at center, so you have that issue as well, where obviously you're always happy to get to Jokic, but when you look at your lineup as a whole, I think a lot of times if you are allocating that pay up money, you're probably going to like your lineup a little bit more if you're paying down at center and then using that money for, say, Luka or Giannis or something like that, as opposed to going to Jokic. But clearly, if you can get to Jokic, great. 7.5% ownership, 7.5% chance of being optimal. So nothing stands out there. Murray getting about 10% ownership, 7,900 looks fine. Aaron Gordon looks fine. So does Porter. But yeah, I think that if everybody's in, Jokic, Murray, probably the guys that you're getting to the most. If guys start the rest, then yeah, it's going to open up some other stuff.
Yeah. Keep your eye on Watson, Strother, Reggie Jackson. Those three guys are probably going to open up if one of these guys drops. Christian Brown, I guess. He's not a great per minute dude. So final game. Through this pretty well. Hour and 15 minutes for the strategy show. You got your sea legs back. We're going to do another hour 15 later today. This is the game that I actually want to watch the most today. Orlando Magic, 2.5-point dogs in LA, taking on the Lakers. Now, maybe it's not going to be that great because the Lakers sit people, but if we start on the Orlando side, no ownership really coming in, except for the fact that FanDuel continues to misprice Paolo Banchero. He's $7K there. I don't know if they forgot to ever watch him play, but not a $7K guy. That's not the right price. He's 31% owned there. 9% to Markelle Fultz. 9% to Markelle Fultz is the high mark on DraftKings. Wendell Carter Jr. looks decent for a $5,900 center. I don't like the Magic in DFS today.
Yeah, they're just another one of those teams where I think the pricing is at least on DraftKings, the pricing is sort of interesting from a range of outcome standpoint. Wendell Carter, like you said, 5,900 at center. You're not prioritizing him, but throw him in with Pirtle and Capella as guys that certainly can just obliterate this price tag. Markelle Fultz at 5,400, getting 8% ownership, pretty much the same thing. Cole Anthony off the bench at 5,300, 28 minutes last game. You're not expecting him to put up big games all that often, but at 5,300, I mean, he certainly can have a big game. So we have him projected to go a little bit under owned. Same goes for Carter. Same goes for Fultz. But again, we're talking about guys that are relatively unlikely to succeed. It's just that their chances of succeeding are still higher than their ownership. 6% chance of being optimal for Carter, 3% ownership. Same for Cole Anthony. 10% chance of being optimal for Fultz, 8% ownership. So guys that I think you kind of mix in as contrarian plays, but nothing that you're really prioritizing outside of, like you said, Paolo Banchero on FanDuel.
Hell of a quote from Draymond about Houston from yesterday. This team, we would have won this game before by 20 or 30 points because that team would have quit, but they're under Ime now. That's a different thing. That's fun to see. Just straight being like, yeah, they would have gave up at halftime from that ass kicking, but Udoka will probably beat those dudes in the back if they quit. So not going to work. Yeah, Fred VanVleet's not having that shit either. On the Lakers side, it's to me not even worth talking about unless talking hypotheticals. They're on a back-to-back. They played an OT game last night in Sacramento. Now, obviously, that's pretty easy travel. LeBron played massive minutes. AD's been playing a ton. We need their injury report. Like, I would be shocked if LeBron James played today. That would make no sense to me whatsoever. A home game against Orlando off a back-to-back. Like, this is just made for him to sit. The question is, does AD do it too? Whoever's sitting, if anybody sits, we're going to have some shit in LA that we need to get to. This is why you use the late swap tool, people.
Yeah, there's good plays here regardless. It's just a matter of who they are. Right now, it's Davis and LeBron. But, assuming one of them sits, like if LeBron's out, obviously Davis looks better. If Davis is out and LeBron's in, LeBron looks better. If they're both out, Russell's going to look better. Christian Wood gets opened up. Austin Reeves looks better. Like, there's going to be good plays from the Lakers. It's just a matter of who they are.
Yeah, we're not going to know. I don't mind Russell at 6,100. His minutes have been there. 0.86 fantasy points per minute so far.
Speaking of coaches lying, LeBron James playing 29 minutes a game lasted a long time.
Yeah, it didn't even last one game.
Right.
he did it the next night, the next game they played. So yeah, we're going to find something. There's going to be value here somewhere. It's just impossible to say that right now. So make sure you're watching the deeper dive. I assume they'll both be questionable, but that is why you'll use the late swap tool, because then you're going to be able to get these guys out and swap to something, make your life a little bit easier. 11 games up, 11 games down, Adam. How's it feel to be back?
Feels good. I think the show actually was smoother than I expected, so happy about that.
I love to see it. Well, you guys know the schedule for the rest of the day. Thank you to Jordan for being the producer. Thanks to Bet365 for sponsoring. Remember, link in the description if you want to sign up and get our tools. This deal is going to end tomorrow. Tip-off is the promo code, 20% off. Good luck, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Come join us for the deeper dive at 4:45. We're out of here. Peace.